Hey, BC here for BC Nephro. Today I'm going to talk about metabolic alkalosis. It's the next in the acid-base series. To see more information on the full acid-base series, check out the playlist at this channel or the articles at bcnephro.com. Links to both will be in the description below. But today we're talking about metabolic alkalosis, what it is and how to figure out what's causing it. So first of all, metabolic alkalosis means the pH is elevated. Both the bicarbonate and the PCO2 are elevated. The bicarbonate is the primary cause of the alkalosis, and the PCO2 is elevated for compensation. So really, in real life, you typically don't have all this data together. What you're really seeing is the serum bicarbonate on the metabolic panel, either as an inpatient or an outpatient. An important point is just because the bicarbonate is elevated does not mean there's a metabolic alkalosis. You really need a blood gas to confirm and to make sure there's not a primary respiratory acidosis. So both the bicarbonate and PCO2 are elevated. You need one of them is primary, one of them is secondary compensation, and the pH tells you this. If the pH is high, the bicarbonate is primary, the PCO2 is compensation. If the pH is low, the PCO2 is primary, and the bicarbonate is compensation. And once we confirm this, the pH is high, the bicarbonate is high, there's appropriate compensation through the PCO2. What's really happening? What causes this? So there's a net gain of bicarbonate in the body or retention of bicarbonate in the body. This can happen for a couple of reasons. So one thing to highlight is if the body excretes a hydrogen anion, a proton, it's the same thing as retaining a bicarbonate because these are all linked together in the body by an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. The hydrogen anion H plus bicarbonate forms H2CO3, which then is dissociated into CO2, carbon dioxide, and H2O water. So this mechanism happens, and then the body you can blow off the PCO2 with your lungs. The water can be eliminated or put into cells. So the body gets rid of an H plus somehow. It's the same thing as retaining a bicarbonate. And there's two ways the body can get rid of an H plus. One is it can lose an H plus, typically through the GI tract. So you're losing the H plus, gastric secretions, vomiting, NG suction. And sometimes there's chloride-rich diarrhea, which you're using the HCl through that. Most diarrheas will give you a metabolic acidosis, but there's a few diarrheas, like a villus adenoma, that can give you a metabolic alkalosis. And then the other way is losing it through the kidneys. You can lose it through the kidneys through diuretics. When a loop diuretic or a thiazide diuretic lose sodium chloride and some hydrogen chloride as well, the bicarbonate is regenerated. And the other way is inappropriately through the kidney. So those are usually through hyperaldosterone or apparent mineralocorticoid excess states, which stimulate the kidney inappropriately to lose hydrogen ions, retain bicarbonate, and there's some other genetic mutations as well that we can get into. The third way that can happen is exogenous alkali, so potassium citrate can be given for kidney stone prophylaxis. Sodium bicarbonate can be given for different reasons to alkalize the urine. And another thing that can happen is milk alkali syndrome or calcium alkali syndrome. So it's usually calcium supplements, and there's associated hypercalcemia. The calcium supplements contain an alkali calcium carbonate. This can give you a metabolic alkalosis as part of this milk or calcium alkali syndrome. So once you've ruled out this milk or calcium alkali syndrome, we're looking to see, is it hydrogen loss from maybe the GI tract or something else, or is it inappropriate loss from the kidney? And so the way they look at this is checking the urine chloride to see if the patient's chloride responsive or not. So usually if there's loss from the GI tract or from diuretics, the patient's going to be volume depleted. If it's inappropriate loss, hyperaldosterone or apparent mineralocorticoid, the patient may be volume expanded. We look at the urine chloride. So why don't we look at the urine sodium? So if the urine sodium tells us if the patient's pre-renal or not, why don't we look at that? So the reason is that if the patient has an alkalosis and the kidney is trying to respond to the alkalosis, maybe from GI losses, and the kidney is trying to respond by eliminating bicarbonate, the bicarbonate is an anion, has to drag a cation with it, and it drags sodium or potassium. So the urine sodium may be high because of the bicarbonate dragging it along, even though the patient is hypovolemic. So you check the urine chloride. Urine chloride low, they say less than 25, it's chloride responsive. So you're thinking the GI losses, you're thinking the diuretics, and the diuretic effect wore off. They had diuretics a couple of days ago, the effect wore off. Now, if the urine chloride is high, they're not chloride responsive, and you're thinking about hyperaldosteronism, which can be primary hyperaldosteronism, could be secondary hyperaldosteronism from a high renal state, glucocorticoid remedial, or it could be a state of apparent mineralocorticoid excess. There's a syndrome called Liddle syndrome. There's another enzyme deficiency, 11-hydroxylate deficiency, that gives you a state of apparent mineralocorticoid excess. So what is that? So the apparent mineralocorticoid excess happens because it looks like there's hyperaldosteronism, but the aldo is low. So one of the ways this happens is by glucocorticoids. So the glucocorticoids, normally the cortisol is normally metabolized to cortisone, so it doesn't have the mineralocorticoid effect. If that enzyme doesn't work because of the genetic defect or is impaired because of the licorice, the cortisol is not converted to cortisone, and you end up getting a mineralocorticoid effect, which can also happen with high levels, as in Cushing's disease or Cushing's syndrome. So the other thing we're looking at is high blood pressure or low blood pressure. So a lot of these states with the GI losses, you're going to have low blood pressure. The hyperaldosterone states or apparent mineralocorticoid excess states, you're going to have high blood pressure. There's one state where there's high urine chloride because of losses in the kidney where you may have a low blood pressure, and that's Bartter syndrome or Gitelman syndrome. So Bartter syndrome is essentially like you're always taking loop diuretic. So there's a mutation in the kidney that gives you a constant loop diuretic. So you're going to be volume depleted, hypokalemic metabolic alkalosis. The Gitelman syndrome is like you're chronically on a thiazide diuretic. There's a mutation in the channel that the thiazide diuretic affects, so it's like you're constitutively on a thiazide diuretic. So that's the approach to metabolic alkalosis. First of all, make sure it's a metabolic alkalosis and not a respiratory acidosis. Then understand the ways that excreting a proton is the same thing as retaining bicarbonate, or was there exogenous bicarbonate going in. Check out the volume status and blood pressure, and check out the urine chloride, and that'll take you to the differential. So if you like this article, hit it a like, share it with some other people you might think benefit from it. Leave comments in the section below if you have questions or other things you want to see in future videos, or you can email me at brian@bcnephro.com. Until next time.